1. Okay, so I went to my local McDonald's by bike as per usual. I do this a lot of the time. I had been waiting for a friend and I brought along my Xbox 360 and my laptop, and my DS and a bunch of old phones to show him, as he doesn't know much about tech. So I walk in, order my stuff, and pull out my laptop and plug it in and leave my bag open. I didn't think much of it. Now I open up my homework and start working about 10 minutes after I finish my meal. And I'm working and all of a sudden I hear my bag open. I look around to see a little kid helping himself pull out my Xbox 360. I by instinct tell him to let go of it and then take it from him. Now I do this and he goes back to his parents. And then I put my headphones back in and continue listening and working, until I feel a tap on my shoulder and see a Karen looking straight at me. Most of your typical Karen shit, and the following conversation happens. Yes? Hi. My son said you took his Xbox away? I was confused and at the same time furious, like this damn Karen well knew I bought that Xbox 360e. Well, I'm sorry to inform you, but I bought it. Did you just argue with me? Now, I have a receipt stored digitally on my phone, so I show it to her, and then she proceeds to shatter my iPhone 6S. And the best part is she yells at me about this in a McDonald's. So I'm like almost done, until I get an idea, and I record her screaming with my DS sound recorder, and it worked. So I grab my shit and run out after 5 recordings of her screaming, and I run to my bike and try to brush her off. I lost her, and I go to one of the cops I met at elementary school. I and that cop were good friends, so I knew where he lived and he was fine with it. I knocked on his door, and the following conversation ensues. Yes, Daniel? Hi, a crazy woman came up to me at McDonald's and tried to take my stuff. Well, do you have any proof? I pull out my DS and play the recordings. Okay, I'll take you to the McDonald's. So a few minutes later we arrive and enter. Cool Cop asks, Hi, my good friend Daniel has a voice clip of screaming and claims that a woman came and tried to take his stuff and proceeded to scream at him for not giving her his stuff and break his iPhone. Do you have any cameras? The McDonald's employee answers, Yes, follow me. He leads us into a security room and played the video. I played along with the voice recordings and they matched. After that, we asked to see footage of her entering her car with the parking lot cams. We see her license plate and he writes it down. And then we exit the McDonald's thanking the employee. We then enter the car and Cool Cop then types in the license plate number on his laptop. A woman's face comes up and he asks, Is this the woman who attacked you? I take a look and it's the exact Karen. He types her address into a GPS and we drive to the house. We knock and the following events ensue. Yes? EM sees the cop and realizes she fucked up. But just before she could close the door, I put my foot in between the door, and it hurt, but it was worth it. I open the door, and the cop pulls her out. Ma'am, you are under arrest for verbal assault of a minor, public disturbance, and attempted theft. She tries to grab me, but she gets tased. The cop takes her and gives me my bike back and says, Thanks, Daniel. You helped me a lot in this situation. Also, you're welcome. Here's your bike back and have a nice day. He then gets in the car and drives off. I found out she got 2 months in prison for resisting arrest and had to pay me $300 for a new phone, due to her bending it while breaking it. After that, I never heard from her again. Hope that taught her a lesson. 2. Years ago, this new neighbor of mine, she had recently moved to a house on the next street over, kept trying for the better part of her summer to use me as a free babysitter. It started when her kid, who was really a cute, well-behaved kid about 7 years old, showed up at my door at 7:15 in the morning. We were all just waking up and getting around, so I told him that my boys weren't ready to play yet, and to come back in a few hours. That is when the kid told me his mom had gone to work. This seemed a bit odd to me, so I brought him in and tried to call his mom. This was the time of only landlines. Sure enough, she was gone. So I brought him in and fed him breakfast. He stayed with us the rest of the day and got along well with my 2 boys, who were 5 and 10. I had only talked to his mom about 2 times, so I had no idea why she would think this was a good idea. When his mom came home, I walked him over so I could talk to her. I told her to not do that again. I told her I would be willing to watch him on occasion, if asked first, but not every day. Her response was, Well, what else do you do all day? This kind of took me by surprise. I tried to tell her that I work at home on commissions. She rolled her eyes and told me that being an artist isn't a real job. And besides, I was married, so I didn't need to work. I should have pointed out to her that she was married and working, but I felt myself getting angry and didn't want to argue with her. Just don't do that again, I said to her. You have teenage kids home for the summer. Have them babysit. She frowned at me and said, They work. I said, So do I. Then I went home. The next morning at 7:15, the kid sheepishly shows up again. Once again, I bring him in and feed him breakfast and later lunch. Once again, I took him to his home and once again told his mother to please not do that again. She actually tried to tell me that it was my neighborly duty to watch him, and I told her that if she sent him tomorrow, I wouldn't be there because of a doctor's appointment. She said that as a babysitter, I should have given her several days' notice about this. I angrily told her I was not a babysitter, and then went home. The next morning, I made my 7 a.m. appointment, blood work. That is why it was so early. I did some grocery shopping afterwards, and it was about 10 a.m. When I got home, the poor kid was waiting for me on my porch. He had been there for nearly 3 hours, and the little guy was scared and hungry. That night when I took the kid home, I was angry. I told her how the kid was scared and alone. She actually said that she had told me I hadn't given her enough time to find anyone else, and that his being alone was my fault. I pointed at her and said, I am not a babysitter. Don't send him over again. That night, this woman and her adult nephew called me to scream at me for not being home when his poor aunt dropped her son off. How dare I leave a small child alone like that? I told the nephew that his aunt knew I wasn't home, so it was her that left the child all alone. I said that I had repeatedly asked his aunt not to send the kid over anymore, and I was not a babysitter. This nephew freaked out at me when I said that, and I hung up on his screaming at me. This worked for 2 wonderful quiet days. Then right back to it. I tried everything, but this woman insisted that it was my neighborly duty to babysit and would tell me as much. Finally, I decided that to solve this problem, I would just get a job outside of my home, and that way she would have to stop. I was too much of a pacifist back then. I no longer am. I landed an interview for a position at the local library, and I was ecstatic. I told the woman to keep her son home because I had arranged for my kids to stay with their grandmother while I went to this interview. The next morning, I drove to my mother-in-law's house and took my kids inside. When I went to leave, I found this woman's kid waiting for me in my car. She had actually followed me there and put her son in my unlocked car and then zoomed off while I was dropping off my boys. My mother-in-law wasn't the most flexible person in the world, and she adamantly refused to watch an extra kid. I had to cancel my interview. I was livid. I toyed with several ideas at this moment. I could take the kid to her job and leave him with her, or I could call the police and CPS. I really wasn't sure how stable this woman's job was, and I didn't want her to get fired. And when I went to go call the CPS, I chickened out because it really wouldn't be fair to the little boy. Besides, I had heard really scary stories about CPS. In the end, I just waited for her to come home. I left the boy at my house with my hubby. I planned on doing a lot of cussing, and I stomped over to her house and met her before she even got out of her car. I shouted at her. I told her she was dense, stupid, moronic, and crazy. I told her that she had lost me my job interview, and if she sent her kid over to be watched again, I was going to call CPS and the police. I told her that she was violating my space, and if it took going to court to get her to knock it off, then so be it. She then put her hand on her hip and in her most snotty tone said, "Well, if you didn't want to sit with him, all you had to do was tell me." I really do not know how I kept from punching her right then and there. This comment was so asinine. I turned on my heels to start stomping home when I saw her husband pulling up. Now, this was the first time I had ever met her husband. He worked at a job that only allowed him to be home on weekends. I can't blame him. I wouldn't want to be around her either. But when she saw him, she turned tail and ran into her house. He saw that I was upset and asked me what had happened. I told him all of it, especially the incident at my mother-in-law's. The poor man was shocked. He had been told that I was being paid, and he had been giving her money to pay me. He had no idea all of this had been going on, and he was very, very apologetic over the whole thing. In fact, he apologized again to my husband when he came over to pick up his little boy. Finally, she stopped sending her kid over. Later I heard from others that she was bad-mouthing me and warning folks about what a horrid babysitter I was, but I took that as a favor. I didn't want to babysit any kids other than my own, and I still hate doing so. I don't hate the kids, I love kids. It's dealing with the parents that I don't like. The kid came over only once in a while after that to play with my kids. After he called first to get permission, exactly the way it should be done. I'm sure his dad had something to do with that because the kid only came over on weekends. This is one of a few stories I have involving this crazy lady. Her only entertainment in life seems to be seeing how bizarre she can act in this neighborhood. I'm luckier than my other neighbors in the fact that she leaves me alone now, and I'm very happy with that. 3. I live in Rochdale Village for about 5 or 6 years now. Rochdale is a nice place, every store within walking distance, but the main part I'm focusing on is the parking lot. You see, each tenant in Rochdale has an assigned parking space in a lot. My family's spot is in parking lot 8. Now, it's not uncommon to see your spot get accidentally taken by someone else, but no one does it intentionally. Except for our Karen. So my dad is driving to the lot when he sees another car in the spot. He gets slightly discouraged, as it's hard to find a regular spot in Rochdale. But he managed to find another one. He goes back the next day, the same thing. The spot was taken, and having to find another spot. Next day, the same thing. This went on for an entire week. But I was very crafty and we managed to take our parking spot before the other car came. Karen was not happy. When we went to the car, we saw Karen and she said this was her spot we took. No, ma'am, this is our spot. We've had it ever since we moved here.
No, I've had it before. This is spot 88, right?
Not an actual spot. No, this is spot 72.
Liar! This is spot 88. I saw it with my own 2 eyes.
Dad points to 72. Then what is that?
You just painted it over to make it say 72.
Points to the numbers next to it as they go chronologically. What about those?
You painted over those too.
And that somehow wasn't noticed by other cars.
You think you fooled others, but you haven't fooled me.
Listen, this is our spot. It has been our spot and will always be our spot until we happen to move out.
Either you move now, or I get your car towed.
Neither will work. Karen then calls the police about assault and how her car was illegally moved. The police show up in 5 minutes. Hello? What does it matter?
Oh, thank God you're here, officer. These maniacs illegally moved my car and assaulted me. I'm pretty sure they also abused their son.
That is a lie. She had taken our spot for a week and we finally managed to get it back.
Don't listen to him. All he does is lie.
Well, I must hear both sides to make sure the truth is revealed.
But I just told you the truth.
And I need to confirm it. After my dad gave his statement, I gave the cop the single best evidence ever, my Spy Gear sunglasses which can record. I gave the cop the video on my laptop. Then the cop also checks the Rochdale database as to who owns the spot. He said my dad's name is spot 72. The woman was nowhere in the database. I'm sorry, ma'am, but we have confirmed the spot belongs to him.
That can't be. He probably lied and hacked the system.
Even if he did, your name never appeared in the system, so you can't have this spot. Karen turns to my dad.
I will sue you for this.
We also have to warn you for filing a false report as well.
You cops are nothing but a bunch of assholes who can't do anything.
She then tried to swing a punch and connect it with the cop's face instead. Ma'am, you will now have to be arrested for not only a false report, but harming a police officer.
No, that can't even be a real officer. He's sided with a bunch of criminals.
She then thrashed around wildly and managed to hit 3 other officers. She also tried to escape, but failed. To top it off, she also managed to hit my dad. She was apprehended and charged with assault, filing a false report and resisting arrest. Don't worry, we sued. When we went to court, she tried to accuse us of assault, molestation, and for the cop, she said he raped her. But we showed the 2 videos of her accusing us and hitting the officer and my dad. Yes, I recorded Act 2 of her assault. When she lost the case, she tried to hit us again, but an officer restrained her and she lost $3,000 and was given a 5-year sentence.
You will pay for this, you giant asshole!
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't speak your language. Come again.
I will end you!
How ironic. She glared one last time at him, but he just laughed at her. 4. So whenever I go to a fast food joint where you can get a meal, burger, fries, and a drink for under $10, I like to pay it forward. I don't go to fast food places often, and I find it a rare treat when I do, so I like to treat the next person in line and leave around $10. Normally people would be grateful that they get their meal or at least part of their meal paid for. So I go inside and order my food and leave the extra money and say please pay it forward for the next person in line. So I'm waiting for my food to come in when in came a mother and her son about 14 years old. They go up to the counter and order a large amount of food, like enough food for 5 people. 6 double cheeseburgers, 4 large fries, and 2 large sodas. It was just them and no one else, and they ordered it as an eat-in. When they go to pay, the food worker says thanks and someone's paying it forward. Their meal was now $14 instead of the $24 it would have been. Choosing mother then asked if food worker knew who it was who paid it forward, and she motioned towards me as I was still waiting. CM turned towards me as I was expecting a thank you or something similar. I looked towards her and smiled, but what she said next totally changed the mood in the restaurant.
Hi, was it you that paid for part of my meal?
Oh yes, it was.
Well, thank you. But could I ask you to pay for the rest of my meal?
I'm sorry, what? You want me to pay for the rest of your food?
Yes, you can clearly pay for the whole meal, and since I wasn't even wanting to come here, but thought I would treat my little guy to some food, it would be the nice thing for you to do.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, but I can't do that. I only ever paid forward $10 since coming here is also a treat for myself. I only ever leave enough for a regular meal.
What? Well, that is rude of you. If you're paying for a small meal, you should be able to pay for my meal. It's not that much more.
The food worker says, "Excuse me, is there a problem?"
Oh no, there's no problem. This lady was just saying how she was going to pay for the rest of our meal too. What's... Mom, if that person is paying, can I get ice cream too?
No, you can't. I'm not paying for your meal. I never said I would.
Of course you are. You wouldn't like to make my son sad.
During this time, FW went and got the manager and explained the situation, because they came out of the back when I started to have an anxiety attack, as well as making it hard to talk.
Ma'am, is there an issue here?
No, not at all. This nice lady was just saying how she was going to pay for our meal and my son's ice cream.
No, I'm not.
Ma'am, I already heard the story from FW, and this lady was trying to be nice and pay it forward, and you try to take advantage of her.
No, she said she likes to pay it forward and pay for meals, so she was buying mine.
No, she's not. Now please pay for your own meal in full and leave, or leave without paying and your food.
But no, she paid it forward. That means she pays for my meal. Mom, I'm hungry. Can we get our food and ice cream now? Now look what you did. You're starving my son. Hurry up and pay so I can get our food now.
Leave now.
No, I'm waiting for my free food.
You have 30 seconds to leave or I will call the cops.
What? You should be making her leave. The only reason she's refusing to pay is because she's racist. I demand you make her pay, then ban her.
Ma'am, you both wait. I'll have FW call the cops and you will be banned from this restaurant.
Luckily, the cop station was just down the road, so they got there very fast and forced her to leave the restaurant, all while she was screaming about how she's gonna make us pay and sue for racial profiling, while her son just walks out behind her, asking when he can get his ice cream. I got my food and calmed down, and paid back my money I had paid, including the $10 I had paid forward, saying it was on the house. It still hasn't made me want to stop paying it forward, but it makes me be a little more wary when people ask who did it, because I don't want another incident. And I hope no one else has to deal with CM, but honestly, I don't think she learned her lesson. But hopeful I never have to see her again. 5. Cast me, a simple middle schooler at the time this happened. C, my friend and daughter of the entitled mother. K and J, 2 other girls in our friend group. And last, but also least, EM, entitled Hell Harpy Mother of C. Know that all of my friends and I were around 12 to 13ish, and EM was well into her 50s. So while I was in middle school, approximately 10 years ago by now, I had 3 good friends, K, J, and C. We were a typical group of middle school girlfriends, going to the mall or movies and having sleepovers all the time. At this point, I hadn't met C's mom, but little did I know what would be in store over the next few years. My first introduction to EM went fine and she seemed like any other mom. Well, except for the Halloween Ouija board seance, but that isn't really related. Until the incident. This happened after a New Year's sleepover I had with my friends. A bit of info. C's birthday was on January 1st, New Year's Day. So my friends Kay, Jay, and I invited C over to my house on New Year's Eve for a slumber party. She declined in order to spend time with her family and because she had a bit of a cold, which was totally understandable for us. Anyways, we went ahead and still had the party, and she said she wanted us to still enjoy the night. The party was a bunch of fun for us and involved fireworks, food, staying up well past sunrise, dressing in drag as boys complete with eyeliner, facial hair, even making the mistake of trying to remove the beards with magic erasers. Oops. And even setting Jay's hand sanitizer covered foot on fire. No one was hurt, just middle school shenanigans. After all was said and done, C texts and asks us how it was, if we had fun, what we got up to, etc. Not knowing what was in store for us, we told her that we had a great time and mentioned that we missed her during the party. Well, she seemed a bit bummed for having missed out, but Jay and I assured that she was very much missed. Kay, on the other hand, didn't really say that C was missed, and instead gushed about the fun. I don't think she was trying to brag, but it came off that way for sure. Hell broke loose. Kay and C got into it over text about Kay being insensitive, etc. And so EM begins to text Kay too. She told her how bad of a friend she was, how she hurt little C by not inviting her, and all that mess. She even said that Kay was responsible for C having asthma problems, which C clarified was actually due to her cold. When the text tirade ended between them, both Kay and C were texting me their sides of the story, and I tried to play as peacemaker as best as I could. Jay wasn't super involved at this point, but Kay was glad I was supporting her and backing her up while C was still upset that I betrayed her by not sending her an invitation. I disagreed and reminded her that she had declined. Let me say, if we'd had phones that could screenshot text, that probably would have fixed everything. And it got worse. I was chilling at home late at night on winter break, probably watching anime, when I got a phone call from C. Thinking it was her trying to figure out the situation, I answered as usual. Coincidentally, I had just put a chocolate truffle in my mouth to eat it, and immediately spit it out when the other voice on the phone was a grown-ass woman screeching at me. Oh boy. EM calling a child in the middle of the night for a screaming tirade was not at all what I was expecting. EM went on to say that KJ and I were terrible, scummy people and horrible friends for not asking C to come to our party. And even told me too, I remember this so vividly, y'all, get my dog off of her daughter. EM thought since K and I were the closest, and because I hosted a party, that I was somehow responsible for the argument between C and K. Because I struggle with confrontation, I immediately apologized and tried to explain while crying that C was invited and declined. It really shook me that EM would target and break down children because her daughter was a bit sad. EM also reiterated that we had caused her daughter to have horrible asthma attacks and made her cry all the time. She continued to screech and never once listened to me, so I gave up trying to figure out what was being said. EM has many events like this while C and I were friends. Yes, we got over this slumber party incident and remained friends until high school. But EM never changed at all, and I tried to stay cordial whenever I saw her. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to the Impractical Proudness of Parents, number 5. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Now, like you, I was also expecting neckbeards this week, but didn't have the story, so I'll try and get it together for next week. They're getting a little thinner on the ground, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe the neckbeards have been listening to the stories on my channel, and others maybe they've been reading them on the subreddits. And maybe they've realized, perhaps I've been a dickhead. Perhaps if I do not act like a dickhead and get my life together, while still enjoying many fun and nerdy things, then I will get a woman in my life, or perhaps a man, or perhaps both, or perhaps many, because polyamory is apparently a thing. Who knows, the sky's the limit when you're not repelling people. etc., etc., etc. As it stands, I have 3 right now. I'll do everything I can to get a couple more for next Sunday, and hopefully we'll get one up by then. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.